Hello, everyone. Welcome here again. It's Katerina Pekova, Tech Community Manager at STRV. I just want to welcome you here at our 11th online talk in these quite strange times. It's really nice to see such a great show up, and I hope that you all enjoy this talk without any major technical issues. So firstly, I would just like to establish some few rules so your experience is as lifelike as possible. You have many options how to interact with the speaker or me or other participants and attendees. So our priority will be the option raise your hand. I mean virtually, of course. So anytime anyone will raise their hands, we will just call you up, unmute you, and then you can ask the speaker directly. Another option is Q&A section where you can just write your question and we will get to that at the end of the talk. Also, you can use chat to chat with the other attendees or us as a participants. And I would like to encourage you to do that. So you can use all the options how to interact and how to network with the others. Okay, so that's basically it. Now I would just like to introduce our speaker, Mr. Jan Kaltoun, who is our iOS platform lead, and along with him, Jan Schwartz, another iOS platform lead, who will be there to answer any of your questions. So that's basically it from me. Thank you. Enjoy this talk. And yeah, that's it. Enjoy.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Jan, and as Katka mentioned, I'm the iOS platform lead here at STRV, and I'm joined here by my also iOS platform lead, Jan Schwartz, here at STRV.
I will enable my camera again. Hello, everyone.
Perfect. I just got a little confused by you disappearing, but you're here. Hey. So Jan will be here to answer all your questions or relay them to me if needed. And he's also the person who will cry in pain in about 30 minutes when I use view controller composition, and I will not add the view controller as a child view controller. Exactly. So, but before we do that, we have a lot of things to go through. So I'll share my screen, although I cannot because I'm not the host. So please, Kate, do that. Excellent. I'm a host now. Okay, desktop number 1. I'll share my screen. Hopefully this will work out better than in the last online session that we had when I had to switch off my camera. Hopefully I will not have to do that. So normally right now I would like to ask you about SwiftUI and your experience with it, but I cannot. So I have prepared a poll. How about we run it first and then we're going to get to the talk. So I will just run it, and I'm really interested in what your experience with SwiftUI is. So the poll should be in, and I'll play some elevator music for you while you're voting. I'll give it 5 more seconds. Excellent. Perfect. That gives me a lot of info. So the first question was, have you used SwiftUI to build something yourself yet? And it's 50-50. 44 and 44% of people said yes and no, likewise. And 2 people asked, what is SwiftUI? So you'll hopefully see today. And then vast majority of people have never used SwiftUI in a production app yet. Just a few have, 2 people. And that is exactly the reason why I have decided to create this presentation. I've created this presentation because when we started playing with STRV, at STRV with SwiftUI, we found out that it's great. It works nicely, especially in this second version that we got, this WWDC, but it's just not as ready to build complex applications from scratch in it. So we still need to keep using UIKit, at least for the foreseeable future. And well, let's not use SwiftUI, right? So we needed to find a way to integrate SwiftUI into UIKit. And fortunately, it seems to be quite possible. And hence this talk that should give you some information about how to use SwiftUI in your existing UIKit apps. And it's not just for the new apps, right, that we build. It's also for the legacy apps. If you're building an application that has been around for 2-3 years, right, then once you drop iOS 12 finally, you probably are still stuck with the same code base. So this kind of knowledge that I'll present today can help you integrate SwiftUI even to your legacy code bases. And because of that, I decided to code this whole presentation on an application that is actually pretty old. If you look at this first file that I have open here, this file has been created by Abel in February of 2019. So it's a very legacy code base. We didn't really think about using SwiftUI in this code base when we started building it, because this is one of the newer files. This is going way back. And the application that I'll be using today is this. It's the weather application that, Jan, can I mention that? I guess I can. It's the weather application that you may get in touch with in our hiring process, should you apply one day. So this application has 2 screens. First, it's a screen that shows an overview of weather for a particular location taken from the device's location. And it has some icon here and some text that describes what city we are in and the overall conditions. And also these little detail views that give you information about precipitation, humidity, air pressure, etc. Then there's a second tab that is the forecast for that location. It's a collection view in our case that has sections with 3-hour intervals for the forecast, right? Quite simple UI. And then I added this mysterious view that is not in the app by default, but I will use it to show a little bit of different type of integration than in the previous 2 tabs. So what are we going to do today? This is a UIKit legacy-ish. Well, it's a pretty good code base, but it's oldish. So what we want to do is we want to take these 3 detail items, right? And we want to replace those with SwiftUI views. Then we want to go to this forecast screen, and we want to replace these cells with SwiftUI views. And then on the mysterious view or mysterious tab, I want to show you how to integrate whole screens written in SwiftUI as opposed to just plain views. Okay, I'm going to build this project once more from a clean slate. And we should see that the first screen looks exactly the same, the second screen looks exactly the same, and the third screen is basically blank. Let's just give it a little while. Perfect. This is blank. This shows the forecast, and this shows the today screen. So how are we going to go about this? Well, first, I'm going to show you the code base a little bit. Firstly, this is a piece of beautifully over-engineered code base where we will have to do things that you probably don't have to do in your code bases once you start integrating SwiftUI. But this is our weather app that we have here at STRV. And so we have 3 different implementations of the weather app in this one Xcode project. We have a UIKit with combined implementation, UIKit with RxSwift, and UIKit with imperative programming. So will be files that I will tell you, of course, that you don't need to update in your code bases. You'll probably won't even have them, but this is the situation that we have in this code base. So let's take a look at the first screen that we're going to be working with. It is in this lovely storyboard. And in this lovely storyboard, you see that IB designables are working perfectly as always, right? The problem here is, and I'm sorry for that, that I am on a beta of everything because I'm playing with Catalyst at the same time. And so basically Xcode beta together with Big Sur beta are not complete friends. They're friends, but not entirely. So what we're going to do is we're going to update this screen by basically removing these three views, right, in this stack view, because there's like a stack view, in a stack view, in a stack view, and two stack views here. So first, I want to delete these three views. I'm just going to select them and delete, right? So wreak havoc completely on my code base, and when I try to run it, there will be errors. And I'm sorry about the compile times. The MacBook is not bad, but the video transfers make builds slow-ish. So hopefully this will get somewhat better soon. Let's just wait for it. Okay, not great so far, but from the experience, it will get faster eventually. I hope so. Well, while it's building, I do have another poll for you that we can run. You can see that we're using storyboards here, and this is by far the favorite discussion between people in the iOS world. So here's a poll for you. The first question should be juicy. Okay, storyboards are getting traction. It's 50-50. Okay, I think we have enough answers here. So yeah, code is winning, and understandably so. It's completely understandable. But quite a few people are using storyboards still, which is nice. And I just added a second question as well that asks you about some knowledge of what we're going to do in this talk. And I asked you, how do you integrate SwiftUI to UIKit? And most of the people chose by conforming the views to UI view representable. And that is not the correct answer. The correct answer is using a UI hosting view controller. But you are close, because the UI view representable case is actually for doing the same thing, but vice versa. So if you would be writing a completely fully SwiftUI code base, and you would be integrating UIKit views into it, you would have to use UI view representable. But here, if you're going from UIKit and integrating SwiftUI views, you use UI hosting view controllers. My code is still building for some reason, which is peculiar, but we're getting to the end, and I hope the subsequent builds will be much, much, much faster. Oh, the first one was quite fast. Who knows? It's not a big code base, though. It's a lot of frameworks, but it's not particularly big. Maybe if I look at my activity monitor, it will tell me, oh, Zoom is taking 150% of my CPU, which is suboptimal. I hope we can figure that out. I will switch off my camera. Maybe that will help. Oh yeah, it did. I dropped to 100 and 45. Okay, Well, the camera is taking a lot of bandwidth of the CPU, I see. Now Swift is running up and it should get faster, hopefully. But I really hope that it will compile eventually. So during these meetings, we always do like a trial run, right? And it works perfectly during these trial runs. Lower video quality. I wish I could, but I don't think I can just update the. Okay, Stefano Itesi is saying something. But Katka, did you see the raised hand?
Yes, I can. I'm just trying to unmute Stefano. Just give me a second.
Okay. Well, I have one theory as well, but I don't like it. I have my MacBook charger connected to the left USB-C port, which can sometimes cause the device overheat and be very slow. So I may as well try connecting the second one, but it will disconnect me, of course. So I'm not sure if we want to do that. Maybe ask Stefano, and I'll do that meanwhile. Hold on.
Stefano, it seems like you are unmuted now. Can you? Well, seems like he isn't here anymore. So
Okay. Well,
but we got a new message. Maybe lower video quality. Oh, that's what you have already tried. Yeah.
Yeah. But meanwhile, the code compiled. So I think that from now on, everything will be completely perfect and super fast. Let's see. So I have compiled the application, and of course it is crashing because I deleted some views from the storyboard, and it's not really enjoying that. So I need to basically comment out bits and pieces of my code to just accommodate for the missing views, right? So I'm just going to do that so that it stops complaining, and we can continue. So I have basically deleted these three IB outlets, these three views, so I don't need them. And of course, I'm binding these items to some data. This is how we do it in this application. And so I will just remove that. Remember, we're using combine in this project, so it may be a little bit unfamiliar, but it's like RxSwift basically. It's just a little different from the imperative programming. Okay, so now we have removed these views, and my storyboard is very understandably quite unhappy, right? Because the stack view is empty, nothing can be sized. So I would like to show you how to add a view, a SwiftUI view into a UIKit view controller using three different ways. The first one is a pure storyboard one. So what I want to do is I want to click plus here, and what I could do is I could actually choose the hosting view controller, right? It's a hosting controller that hosts SwiftUI views. If I do that, it basically shows as its own screen. And that's mostly the thing that you'll be doing. This is not what we're doing here in this example. Instead, we want to do the plain old classical view controller composition. And we do that using a container view. I'm just going to take this container view, and I'm going to add this to the stack view. Now, this makes my storyboard quite happy. The only thing I need to do is I need to update this class to UI hosting controller, like this. Now, I have added the the container view into my storyboard, but of course I need to somehow connect it to my view controller, right? To the actual code thing. So I will need to spin up my assistant view, and it's getting a little bit cramped, but that's okay. And once I get to it, the thing that I need to do is I need to actually not connect the view itself here, or the hosting controller itself, to my code, but I need to connect this lovely segue action, right? Well, the assistant is not working super well right now. I'm just gonna unshow it and show it again. I think that it will become a little more reasonable. Let's see. If not, I have another way of doing it. Well, okay. Not really helpful, Xcode. Not really helpful, but I still like you. I'm just going to make a little more space here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another thingy here. And I'm going to open my today content controller, which is what I'm showing here in the storyboard. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag from this segue. I'm going to create something called IB segue action. I'm going to call it embed humidity detail info view, like this. And I'm going to click connect. What this is going to create, and I can close this so that it's a little better visible. What this is going to create is a, well, IB segue action. And this IB segue action is a thing that is quite new. I think it's from the last Xcode, from the previous version of 12. And it basically lets you connect your segues into your code instead of using prepare for segue method, right? And so in this particular case, what it needs is for me to create my actual UI hosting controller instance. Now, hosting controller, as I mentioned, is a way of integrating SwiftUI view into UIKit. This is just the way how it's done. There's no other way. So whenever you want to put your SwiftUI view into UIKit, you always need to use UI hosting controller, and that applies to both views themselves as well as like the whole screen's a view controller equivalent. Although in SwiftUI it would be just a view, right? So here I have this IB action or IB segue action, and actually the compile times are much better now. I'm flattered. I'm happy. And it's actually having two problems here. First, well, I haven't implemented it, so of course it doesn't like it. And second, it says cannot find type UI hosting controller in scope. Well, that's obvious because UI hosting controller is actually coming from SwiftUI. I have to import SwiftUI. Now, this should make it happy, but still, I need to implement it. And also, it's saying that the UI hosting controller is generic over some arguments, and it's generic over the SwiftUI view that you want to display in it. So here I have prepared, and I'm going to show you in a second, a SwiftUI view that is the today detail info item view, like this little thingy that I showed you. Well, it's not running for some reason, but whatever. It's the little thing with the icon and a text. Now, this should satisfy it, but now it says that the method cannot be marked as IB segue action because its result type cannot be represented in Objective-C. Well, obviously, because it's SwiftUI. So I can't do that. What I can do, though, is I can just say that this is a UI view controller because UI hosting controller subclasses UI view controller, and that's enough. That will make the compiler quite happy. So now, how do we initialize it? Well, if I want to initialize UI hosting controller, I have multiple inits available to me to use. But this time, I want to use the one with a coder. It's being provided to me. And you're going to use this one just in this IB segue action, by the way. And I'm going to just pass the coder. And the second parameter is the root view. And here comes the beauty. The only thing that you need to do is you actually just need to initialize your SwiftUI view here, like this. So this one takes two parameters. An item type, which is the type of the view that you will be displaying, either humidity or precipitation or whatever. I'm going to show you in the view itself in a second. So this one is going to be humidity, and it takes some store. And now is the time to take a look at the view. So the view is quite simple. It's just a VStack with an image and a text. But it needs data, right? It needs data from somewhere. And ideally, the data should be updated when new data comes. For example, you change your location, or I mean, you're on a train and it's changing constantly, right? Stuff like that. So how to do that? Well, I'm not going to go into many details because it's not the point of this kind of presentation, but you need something that is observable, and your view needs to observe it. Usually we call this a store, and here we have a to-the-detail info item store that is basically just a class that conforms to observable object that has one little property that is called info, and that is of type to-the-detail info view model, and it's published. Now, why do I do this? Well, if you're working with a legacy application, you probably have some architecture in place already. This time in this application, it's MVVM-C, right? So we have our view models that are used throughout the application. Now, you need to connect that view model, the data from the view model somehow to your SwiftUI view. But SwiftUI uses a little different bits and pieces than what you might use in UIKit. For example, it uses published properties, right? And I don't have that in my view models. So I had to create this intermediary store to kind of connect my view model to the SwiftUI view. Hence this. It just entirely reuses the whole view model. It just publishes it, right? And so this SwiftUI view requires this store to be passed into it so that it can observe it and update itself based on the data that is published. Now, I would show you the preview, but that would probably kill my computer again, so I will not. It's just a little VStack. So to actually be able to pass this store, I need to create it, right? So I'm just going to create some property named humidity store. I'm just going to say public let humidity store is a today item store, right? The same thing that I just showed you. Now it has a default value, so I don't have to pass any parameters into it. And you may be noticing some similarities here. This is basically MVVM. It's literally just MVVM, the thing that you would do normally in MVVM. It's just a little different in how it's named and how the data is propagated, but it's just MVVM if you're using stores. Now, what you would do if you were building an application in UIKit from scratch and you started today is that you would probably make your view models already publish information, right? You would make everything so that it doesn't have to have these intermediary objects. But yeah, I have a legacy code base, so I have to have them. Now, I have one here. I will just go and create the 3 remaining. So we have one for precipitation as well. And we need one for pressure as well. I'm going to use them later. And what you could do, and what you would probably do in your MVVM application is that you would probably have all these in one view model, right? You could actually create a store with all these 3 inside and just have one. Just decided to go with 3. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to compile this application right now. Hopefully, it's much faster. And it's going to say that it doesn't like something. Well, of course, because this should be optional. Because when I changed it to UIV controller, I didn't make it optional, but it was before. So let's just wait for the compilation to happen. And it's faster. I think it was either the camera or the port. Please don't connect your MacBooks onto the left port. Anyways, here we can see that our SwiftUI view is actually here in our stack view. And that's actually what it takes. You just, in one way or another, initiate your UI hosting controller, and then you use it to display the view in your UIKit app. That's basically it. So this is the first way of doing it, right? A little ugly way, I must say, because you have the segue here, IB segue action. Not great. 2 more ways, of course. The first one is to not use the container view, but simply use a view, right? You get a view as a placeholder, but you get rid of the IB segue action. You get rid of this ugly hosting controller here, and you do everything in code. So let's do that. This will be my precipitation detail info item view. I'm going to go to my controller again, and we need to do a little bit of setup. So here I have a setup UI function that gets called when view gets loaded. I'm just going to say SwiftUI here, and I'm going to create some function. This function I will call setup precipitation detail info item view. As you can see, I really like long function names. Mr. Schwartz can attest. We have long discussions about that. So here, I need to first run the function because I always forget to do that. And we need to do exactly the same thing as we've done above, but a little more code so that we do all the stuff that storyboards do for us in the background. So first and foremost, we need to create our hosting controller, right? I'm just going to say let precipitation hosting controller or detail hosting controller is a UI hosting controller, right? And so this UI hosting controller, again, has multiple inits that I can use. But this time, I'm not going to use the coder. I'm just going to say root view is something. And you know the drill. It's exactly the same as before. So I'm just going to copy paste this in there. I'm going to change the item type to precipitation this time. And I'm going to pass a different store to it, right? Because it's a different value that we're going to be displaying. Now, what next? Well, we need to set up some constraints on this. So first, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take the view of this hosting controller, and I'm going to set the tamic or translate auto resizing mask into constraints to false. And I'm going to add this view controller as a child of my view controller, the one that displays the whole screen, right? Then I'm going to take the subview, the view of the hosting controller, and add it as a subview to my placeholder view, right? But I need the placeholder view first in my code. So I need to go back and link this view into my code, right? So let's see if we're a little more lucky with the assistant this time. I hope so. Please don't betray me, Xcode. Well, it's even worse than before, it seems. It's horrible. Okay, I'm gonna do it the same way. I'm just gonna go and open another kind of split screen here, and I'm gonna open the view controller here. I'm just gonna link the whole thing together like this. So let's call this actually the same as before, the precipitation detail info item view, right? I'm just gonna go and control drag in here. Name it the same thing, right? Okay, perfect. I have to do this only once more, so let's see how it goes. I'm gonna close this one. I'm gonna go back to my code, and we can use this, right? So I can use this IB outlet to actually add the subview. I'm just gonna say this, the detail info item view, add subview, right? And it's going to be the view of my hosting controller. So like this, the hosting controller dot view. Now I need to set up some constraints to basically pin it to the edges of the view. But I'm horrendously lazy, so I'm just going to cheat a little bit, and I'm just going to copy paste the constraints here. But it's just pinning the anchors together, right? And I need to activate the constraints, nothing too unusual. And last but not least, I actually have to tell the hosting controller that it did move to parent, which is myself in this context, right? So we've basically done all the things that Storyboard does for us. If I run the application right now, please be fast this time. Well, whenever I say please, it gets slow, so just be fast. Okay, it works. We should see two views at this moment, and we indeed do. Perfect, so we have two views now. We have to add the third one as well, and that's basically the simplest option, especially useful when you're writing your UI in code. And I'm gonna do this by linking my stack view into my code, right? So I need an outlet for this stack view that contains these three views. Well, right now two, but three views very soon. And I'm just going to add the view into it programmatically. So I'm going to take the stack view, and let's call it something interesting, something really hard to type ideally. Let's just say details top stack view. OK, so we have the IB outlet right now, and we can add the view into it, right? So I'm just going to close this again, because screen real estate is precious. I'm just going to create one more function. Let's call it setup, this time pressure detail info item view. Detail info item view. Long name sign up. Again, I'm just going to run it immediately because otherwise I will forget, like this. And we need to do the same thing. So I need to take this initialization of my hosting controller, just going to rename it to pressure. I'm just going to pass pressure as the item type here, which just decides the image, nothing more, nothing less. And I'm going to pass a different store into it, right? Then I just need to add child view controller, which will be my pressure detail hosting controller. The same thing as before. I need to get the details top stack view, add arranged sub view in it. Very simple. Just the view of the hosting controller again. And last but not least, I need to tell the hosting controller that it did move to its parent view controller, which is myself. Right? Very simple. If I run this application right now, everything should be fine, and I should see 3 views. So let's hope. I think we'll be successful. Also, I think that will run a little over time because of the technical issues, but not much. So looking at the code right now, it's nice. And looking at the view itself, it's nice. There is one tiny problem, though, and that is that it's not displaying any data, which is a problem in a data-driven app. So we need to somehow fix it. I'm first going to do a little shenanigan here that is required thanks to the architecture that we have in this application, where we are basically sharing multiple implementations. And as you can see, I need to relay the stores through an extra view controller. All is fine. Nothing happened. You almost didn't see anything. But now I can go to my today view controller, which contains the content view controller, and do stuff in it. And actually, the only thing that I need to do is I need to connect the data somehow to the stores. And as you can see, we have an architecture where we basically map outputs from the view model to the actual views. Instead of doing that here with SwiftUI, I'm going to map the value not into a SwiftUI view like a label or text or button or anything directly, but I'm going to map it to the store because, you know, SwiftUI view needs something that is observable. So how do we do that? Well, first we uncomment these 3 lines that I commented out like 15 minutes ago. And as you can see, it just takes the output, which is the view model that I showed you, and it assigns it to something. Here it's a view. I'm going to do it differently. I'm still going to take the view model, but I'm going to assign it to the info property of my store, right? So here it's going to be humidity store. Here it's going to be to the info property of the precipitation store. Here it's going to be the info property of the pressure store. And that's it. Since the SwiftUI view is observing the stores, or the SwiftUI views are observing the stores, the only thing I need to do is to set a new value of the published property of the store, and the SwiftUI view will reload itself automatically. I'm just going to run this application again, and if everything goes correctly, everything will compile quite nicely, and I will see some data. And voila, we have the data here. So this is the first way, or the first example of integrating SwiftUI views into UIKit app. We haven't done anything too crazy. We just took hosting view controllers and we added them using 3 different ways into this screen. So now let's do the same thing, but for a little more complicated example, and that is for this forecast view. So there's a forecast view controller, or better said, forecast content view controller in our case, which is again the same thing, a composition. And here I need to do one important thing, and that is register my cell. Now, this is using a standard collection view cell, which I could just update, but I decided not to. I decided to create a new one. So I just need to go and register my new cell into this collection view, right? I'm just going to say register this SwiftUI forecast cell with reuse identifier. Oh God, this is always hard. For cell reuse with reuse identifier. I mean, Xcode could help, right? But it does not. And I'm going to call it SwiftUI forecast cell. Yes, you could have some conveniences for this, but I don't, because this is not the point of this presentation. So now I have registered my new cell. I'm just going to quickly show you what it looks like. It's just a very simple UI collection view cell that is completely empty, so that I can put my SwiftUI view into it. If we looked at the forecast cell that was there before, it's your typical UI collection view cell with IB outlets and stuff. But we don't have IB outlets in SwiftUI, so we have to do it a little differently. So I'm going to go to my forecast controller, and I need to update one function. Now, here we have the simple diffable data source / compositional layout setup, right? I hope everyone is using it if you can. And the only thing I need to do is I need to update the dequeuing of the cell to use my new cell, right? So I'm just going to go here. I'm going to say, let my cell that is of type SwiftUI forecast cell is collection view, dequeue reusable cell. And I need a nice function signature, which is this one. I don't need to type again. I'm very happy. Using the index path, and I'm just going to forcecast it to my SwiftUI forecast cell, because why not? And SwiftLint will hate that, so I'm just going to do SwiftLint disable next forcecast, right? Like this. So I will run the application. Hopefully SwiftLint won't complain too much, and it will let me compile. Excellent. And if I go into my forecast screen, what I should see is emptiness, right? Because these collection view cells are quite empty. I'm just seeing the sections for the days and nothing more. So let's fix that. Well, to do that, I need to go into my SwiftUI forecast cell and, well, put some stuff in it, right? So first, I'm going to start by creating the store, which I have conveniently prepared already. And I'm going to show you what happens here. So each time the cell gets dequeued, this configure function gets called, which sets the view model, right? And I want to reuse as much as possible of this. This is how it's done in the UIKit version. And once the view model is set, I update the UI, which is this function. And the UI is clicked before that, of course. So first, let's just put the view where it belongs. So this setup UI function gets called when it's initialized, or the cell at least, and I need to put the hosting controller there. So I'm just going to say let hosting controller, and again the same thing, UI hosting controller, right, with a root view that is something. My root view in this case will be SwiftUI forecast cell content. Now this view is needing a store as well. I'm just going to pass it. And if we look at the view itself, it is a bit more complicated, but not too complicated. So first, there's an H stack, right? In this H stack, there's an icon if it's actually present, the data for it. Then we have a B stack that shows the actual current time and the description of the weather conditions. And then at the very right, there's the temperature, right? Much easier than to do it in a storyboard. So now, since we provided a store already, this view will be quite happy. And we need to do the same shenanigans as always. So I'm just going to say hosting controller.view.tamic is false. And now I would do something like parent view controller add child and you know, the hosting controller. But we're in a cell, and I cannot do that. Now, this is possible to do, but at the same time, this presentation would be too long. So I did not. But please bear in mind that you should do it. It's going to work without it, but all the lifecycle events will be kind of broken. Well, actually, not happening at all. So now I need to set up my constraints, right, and activate them again, and yada, yada, yada. And I'm going to cheat and just copy the thing over because, well, we've done it already twice. And so I'm just pinning everything to the anchors, right? And one last thing I should do is I should probably tell the hosting controller that it moves to its parent, but I have no parent here. So Jan Schwartz, please cry in pain right now, but I assure you it will work. So, but you should really do that. Like, honestly, you should do that if you want to do it in the cell. If you look at the store, it has 5 handy properties that we need to be setting, right? And it has a handy clear function that I can run to actually clear the SwiftUI view that is observing this store. So I'm just going to say store.clear. And in this update UI function, I actually need to get the data from the view model, right, and set it on the store. Again, connecting the two. You could have this. You could have the view model observable, and you would not have to do this. But since in my case the view models are structs, and structs cannot be observable, well, I have to do this. But if you were writing the app from scratch, you could kind of avoid this this kind of work. And here we need to do stuff like let's say temperature is my view model dot weather. Come on, view model dot weather dot main weather info dot formatted temperature, right? Stuff like this, because I need to basically connect it to the data structure in the view model. Now, I don't want to write all this because there's a lot of code. I'm just going to go and copy it over like this. Magically, my store is connected to the view model, but really it's just transforming the data from the view model to the store. It's just 2 different data structures, but the same data. And at the end, I'm setting some accessibility stuff because accessibility is important. Now, if I run the application, I believe that it won't crash. And I will see my cells. Voila, my cells are here. So we just used SwiftUI view as a view in a reusable cell. And the view actually stays the same all the time. It's not being reset each time. It's still there. The only difference is, well, the only thing that changes is the data in the store. And since the SwiftUI view observes this data and changes or re-renders the SwiftUI views that are in it as needed, it's actually quite efficient, I believe. The only thing that you need to do is really to figure out these 2 things, but it would make the code unnecessarily complicated. So I didn't. Cheating. So now what we have done is we have updated this view with these 3 SwiftUI views. And this view, I'm already in view, this view controller with these views in these reusable cells. Perfect. Everything is working. We actually didn't even have to write much code. The only thing that is a little bit annoying is going back and forth between the data from the view models. But that is something that you can avoid by refactoring either your view models or just writing them from scratch as needed as observable objects with published properties. So the last thing I want to show you today is this mysterious view. And this is actually the thing that you're going to be doing mostly. Like, you know, replacing views here and there is probably counterproductive if you have your existing like code base in UIKit, because it's going to be probably more readable and faster in UIKit. The only thing that I can imagine you doing this is maybe adding some fancy animated view that is much easier to do in SwiftUI, but pretty, well, I don't say hard, but pretty annoying to do in UIKit. So maybe you have a nice spinner view with some cool animation. That thing I can imagine you would be basically putting as a separate view into an existing view hierarchy. But normally what you do is you're just going to write the whole screen in SwiftUI and embed it like I'm doing here. maybe embed it in a tab bar, or push it in a navigation controller, whatever is needed. So how do we do that? Well, in this application, we have coordinators, and please use coordinators. Coordinators are great. This is a little bit complicated implementation of coordinators with events getting handled using enums and stuff. No need to pay much attention to this, although there's a great blog post by Gleb Arkhipov on our blog where you can read a lot about it. The only thing you need to know is that there are coordinators, and I'm going to be doing stuff in them. But I have conveniently prepared the coordinator already, because otherwise we'd be here unnecessarily long. So I can go into my mysterious scene coordinator. And as you can see, there's a factory that says make mysterious scene view controller. Now, I actually need to update this function, right? Because, well, it just returns an empty UI view controller and hence the black screen. Well, you know what we need to do. We need to create some store. And I have conveniently prepared my mysterious scene store. And we need to return some hosting controller, right? I'm just going to return UI hosting controller as always, right? I'm going to, as always, set a root view into it. And it's going to be my SUI mysterious scene view that takes a store like this, right? If we look at the store or at the view first, you will see that it's a very, very simple view. It has a VStack that contains a button that has a ghost emoji on it for whatever reason, because it's mysterious. And then there's a text that displays some property, a ghost count. So each time you press this button, this gets incremented. Nothing more, nothing less. If you look at the store, it's just that, really, as a published integer property and just a function that increases it by 1, just to add some functionality to it. And then it has a navigation link that actually pushes the same view with the same store so that the data is persisted onto the navigation stack. So let's run the app. And I think that this is the beauty of SwiftUI and UIKit. Once you start writing the whole screens, it actually gets pretty easy. So now I have a full SwiftUI screen in my UIKit app, in my tab bar as a separate tab. Everything works. If I tap the ghost, this gets increased. If I go next using the navigation link, it actually gets persisted, the data, the value, and I can push as many as I want on the navigation stack. And as you can see, it actually integrates well with the UI navigation controller. Here in the coordinator, I actually have not a navigation view from SwiftUI, but it's a plain old UI navigation controller. But since I am using the UI hosting controller and SwiftUI is pretty smart, it can integrate with it quite nicely. So you can just work with the SwiftUI view as a view controller, and it will be completely fine when you do that. But let's step it up a notch. So here we have coordinators, right? And when you have coordinators, you probably want to delegate the navigation to your coordinator. You probably don't want to have the navigation done using navigation links, because then your views are taking care of the factories of creating the next views, right? And setting data on it, and your whole architecture breaks. So let's just put a coordinator in it as well. Well, first, we need to actually put the coordinator in the init. So let's just say coordinator is self. This is my coordinator that creates this this SwiftUI view. I will just pass self into it. Of course, it is not in the init, so I need to, well, add it. And that is quite simple. You just need to add the weak variable that is your coordinator, which will be of type mysterious scene event handling. Now again, this is a bit more complicated setup of coordinators, but we have a setup where there's a protocol for each kind of coordinator or a screen that has a handle function that can handle one of the coordinator events. And this time we will have just one called did tap on go next, right? So this, I need to put it in my init because, well, it is not there, and I cannot use the synthesized init because this is in a different framework than all the other code, again, because of the reuse. I'm just going to say self coordinator is a coordinator, right? Here in the navigation link, I need to pass it as well. This is exactly why you should have coordinators, because otherwise you're going to have your view code cluttered with logic. And I also need to update the previews. Now, if you enjoy the power of protocol-oriented programming, this will be actually pretty easy. So I need to add the coordinator here. Now, typically, I would need some instance of the whole coordinator with its functions and stuff, and I would have to implement all of them. But since we have this nifty protocol, mysterious scene event handling, I can actually go and create something like class mock coordinator that conforms to this protocol and has the one function that will just print YOLO here. And I can just initiate it like this, right? Everything is fine. Protocol-oriented programming for the win, super easy. We love it. And now we just need to add a button. So let's add a button. I'm going to add a button in this view that will say, let's say, I don't know, go next using coordinator. And it's going to have an action that will say coordinator.handle did tap on next, right? And we just need to handle this event in our coordinator. So I'm going to go into my protocol here, which again, you don't need to do in your application as it says here. It's just because of the multiple implementations here that we have in this one project and sharing of code. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch over the event. I'm going to catch the one that says did tap on go next, right? And do you know what we're going to do here? Well, you know, we're gonna initialize our view, and we're gonna put it in the UI hosting controller as always. So let's just say navigation controller dot push view controller. As you can see, we're back in UIKit, right? It interacts quite nicely. This will be animated, of course. I'm gonna format the code because I have an OCD. And here I'm going to put the UI hosting controller, right? Again, it has a root view. And behold the beauty, I can just put a text here that says it works. And that's it. I will build the app. And if everything works correctly, the navigation link will still work. The button with the ghost will still work. But there will also be a button that will actually call a function on my coordinator. Let the coordinator handle the event. And when handling the event, create a new SwiftUI view and push it onto the UI navigation controller. So we'll go to SwiftUI, right? From navigation controller to SwiftUI. Then we'll go from the SwiftUI to coordinator back to UIKit to navigation controller, and then back to SwiftUI because we'll display the text. So let's try. The Go still works. Going through navigation link still works. And if I press the Go Next using coordinator, it will present another SwiftUI view. And that is how ideally you integrate your SwiftUI views as whole screens into your UIKit codebase. So we've gone through three things. First, we replaced static views here, static-ish views. Of course, the data is dynamic, with three different ways. In the second screen, we replaced reusable views in reusable cells with a very similar approach. And on the third tab, we actually implemented a SwiftUI view as a whole screen from UI navigation controller, but we also integrated it with the coordinator so that you can go back and forth from SwiftUI to UIKit and from SwiftUI to UIKit. And if you had some data, you would just have a view model or store, as we call it in SwiftUI, that you could use from both UIKit and SwiftUI, as I showed in the examples before. And so that's how you do it. It's frankly quite easy. So thank you. If there are any questions, I'm super happy to answer them. Any questions?
Well, it doesn't seem like that. There was one question in Q&A section, but Honza already answered that. So...
Thank you, Jan. So in that case, I have a final poll that we should run through. How about we do that right now? I'll switch on my camera again so that you can see me as well with my beautiful Animal Crossing background. So a poll. gonna launch the poll number 4, and let's see. So based on what you learned today, are you going to use SwiftUI in your UIKit app? Maybe. And is SwiftUI the future or not? Just going to give it a little more time. And I think that's enough. Okay, so it seems that most of the people will maybe use SwiftUI in their UIKit apps, and I don't blame you. It's a lot of stuff to learn. It's not easy, it's a different paradigm, but as we can see that most of the people said that SwiftUI is the future, and if it's the future, you should start using it right now, because you don't want to be late when the future comes. You don't want to start learning SwiftUI when the future comes. So I hope you learned something today about how to get started with SwiftUI in your UIKit code bases, and I hope that you will love SwiftUI as much as I do, and you will use it as much as you can do. As a Q&A thing here. Okay, it says, do you feel okay building a new production project from iOS in SwiftUI only right now? I don't. I so much want to. Honestly, there's no one at STRV that would want it more than me, because I love SwiftUI, but it's just not there yet. We've built multiple SwiftUI apps at STRV already, but they are internal apps, and yes, it's possible, but you run into many problems where if you're working on an app for a client, you just cannot waste that time. So a pet project, internal app, yes, even production one. A client project, it's just not there yet. But I'm really persuaded that, I'm really confident that in the next incarnation at next WWDC, it's going to be possible already. Any other questions? I don't seem to be any, maybe. What about combination? Yes, UIKit and SwiftUI, I think that's a good combination. We are actually encouraging everyone at STRV to start doing that. Because, for SwiftUI has problems, but when you know it, and you know what to expect, and you know what it is capable and also incapable of doing, then you can easily decide whether this screen is a good fit for SwiftUI or not. So yes, I would suggest to do that. So Marek is asking whether it is a good idea to use complete SwiftUI for a new project. Well, as I mentioned, if it's your pet project, the time is not the issue, and it's a fairly simple app, then yeah, we build apps purely in SwiftUI. So it is possible. If time is of the essence, you don't know what you're getting into, and it's probably going to be a complicated app, I would not suggest it at this moment. But I really want to. So I'm really, really confident that in June, next June, it will be possible. Matush is asking for an extra question. Combine and UIKit. Yes, very much. Jan Schwartz, together with the others, have actually completed a project in UIKit and well, a template project in UIKit and Combine, right, Jan? How's your experience with it?
Let me unmute myself. Well, not sure if you are used to using RxSwift. So RxSwift has a lot of extensions for binding your RxSwift code to Cocoa and, well, UIKit. So we still miss these extensions for UIKit, but as you saw today in the on the existing code, you are able to bind it with the assign function. So yeah, it's pretty usable. I like it.
Actually, Jan is the person who helped write this whole application, right? this whole implementation in Combine, and together with Abel. And this whole thing is a Combine UIKit app. There's nothing else. It's just Combine and UIKit, parallel to the other implementations, of course. So it's doable, and it's frankly quite pleasant. I don't miss the bindings as much. Well, a little. And then there's another person, anonymous, asking to mention preconditions of using SwiftUI in, for example, a legacy app. So there are two things, like legacy and non-legacy, right? Brand new app, is time of the essence? If yes, then, and this is your first SwiftUI project, then I would discourage you to do it. If it's your personal project, fairly simple. Yeah, I have a personal project purely in SwiftUI, and it works quite nicely once you get into SwiftUI. But if you're building a client project and you have a deadline in 3 months, then, well, that's a problem. For the legacy code base, well, first you need to support at least iOS 13, right? Ideally iOS 14, but iOS 13 is enough. You are kind of limited to the SwiftUI version 1, quote unquote. That's basically it. Like, you should have good architecture, of course. Like, coordinators help a lot, in my opinion, because they abstract everything away. And MVVM is also working good, because basically the stores that you're using in the very basic SwiftUI architecture is literally just MVVM. So once you have MVVM with coordinators, you actually have everything you need for starting to integrate the SwiftUI views. That's basically this and iOS 13. Matusz is saying, Matusz is saying that he doesn't miss bindings either yet. Yeah, I mean, I think someone is bound to like create them eventually. Or maybe someone is working on them, but they just don't exist yet. But it's okay without them. It's just a little inconvenience. Any other questions? Okay, I think that's it.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, no, it doesn't seem like that. Okay, so I would like to thank everyone for your participation. Also, a huge thank you to our speaker for a great presentation, even though we had some technical troubles at the beginning with the hosting and so on.
Nah, that's fine.
I think we managed.
We did.
And I would like to invite you for our next iOS talk, which is happening on November 19th with Filip Haškovec, who will be talking about security and convenience in iOS 14, and also Gleb Arkhipov presenting the topic supercharging your coordinators. So,
by the way,
yes.
By the way, the coordinators that I used here in this project, and I was telling you that you can look at the blog post, this is exactly what Gleb will be talking about. So if you want to learn how to use really nice coordinator architecture, then this is the talk for you.
Okay, so that's another reason why to join us next time. And so if you want to just register yourself on the Eventbrite, or you can look at the event section on our website, where you can scroll down the topics we have prepared for our online edition of online events, autumn edition of online events. And since we want to be proud of everything we do, we have prepared a really, really short survey where we are interested on your feedback for this event. So it will appear just when you leave this Zoom webinar. So thank you in advance, and see you next time.
Thank you everyone for coming, and see you on the next talk.